G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today we are going to have a little bit of a reflection on the first 13 games of the season. It's not really in the middle point of the season, but for us it's our bye week. Naturally there's no preview this week because we don't have a game. Got a week off until we play Essendon, so I thought we'd look back and do a bit of a positives and negatives based on the season so far. Now, bear with me. I'm back in the swing of things, but my body still thinks I'm on a boat, so the room is swaying. But I'm doing my best to try and make good content for you, but I'm sweating. And I just had I don't know the English word for it, but in Croatia they say, El Betuino the video puco. I'm sorry, that is oversharing, but I'm going to do my best. So, talking about how this season's gone. So, we'll break it up into negatives and then work through some positives, and then I've got a bit of a statistical breakdown for how this season's gone. And of course, I welcome your input in the comment section below for anything I've missed. So, we currently sit third last, 3 wins and 10 losses. So, I'm trying to think, how would we have felt at the start of the season if we were offered 3 and 10 after 13 rounds? And I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's overwhelmingly positive. It's probably about right when you consider we should have always expected a little bit more, considering, we don't have the same injury crisis we did over the last couple of years. So I think we're right on the cusp of par. It's also a little bit flat to do this straight after a really poor 3 weeks. Our wins have been fantastic. It's been an up and down kind of year. And, I don't think our losses have been disgraceful up until maybe the last 3 weeks. I think, Adelaide, we were really, really poor. St Kilda wasn't horrendous, but it wasn't, great because our expectations started to move up with some really good wins at home, some really good performances. We weren't quite up to that standard against St Kilda. And against North Melbourne, I thought we were quite poor. Respectfully to North Melbourne, it was a very lackluster performance from us. Polish wasn't there. The effort was okay without being, outstanding. We were smashed in some very key parts of the game. So the mood and the vibe at the moment is low because of the performance in the last 3 weeks. But overall, the ledger, considering some of the good wins we've had, in particular, there's been 3 really good wins where we looked dominant. And the fact that one of them was against Melbourne, who, again, are in a bit of a form slump at the moment, but nonetheless have been considered a contender all year. We beat Fremantle. How good is that? They've actually been playing some good footy too. They're in the mix for finals for sure. I think top 6 or something currently. Maybe not currently because of the bye rounds, but I think they were 6th by the time of their last game. And of course, Richmond, who are doing it tough at the moment, but nonetheless, we've looked good and we've had some big moments. So let's start with some negatives. And I do think, while we've probably only been par, I think the positives do outweigh the negatives. So we'll start with the negatives, and I think it's very clear to start off that we do rely too much on too few. And a lot of our heavy lifters have probably carried us at times. Harley Reid comes to mind. I don't think he's been week in, week out dominant. There's no doubt about that. But when he's been on, he has turned us into a different team. And, all of the games we've won this year have been a product of Harley Reid being sensational. And even against St Kilda, the first half of that game, he was sensational in that second quarter. And we were winning up to that point. He gets tagged out of the game, we drop off. Now, I really don't think it's a case of no Reid, no West Coast, because we are getting a lot out of some other players as well, which we'll get into when it comes to the positives. But generally speaking, we have a list profile that is top and bottom heavy. We are getting a lot out of a select handful of really good senior players. I think our tall backs have been good. Yo in the midfield, Kelly's been decent, Waterman. And of course, Harley Reid, you slide into that mix as well. And then, there's probably a lot of passengers at the moment where the core group don't fire, and we tend to fall away as a team as well. Now, for me, this is kind of to be expected. If you took an honest look at our list profile going into this season, that was always probably going to be the case, right? But nonetheless, it is a negative and something that we need to rectify, and I think we will rectify. The next negative has been the last 3 weeks. I kind of already touched that. But when you consider, looking at the St Kilda games and the North Melbourne games prior to them happening, you would have thought we should start favouring both of those games, considering our form at home and considering, St Kilda and North Melbourne haven't had great seasons. So we sit 3 and 10 instead of 5 and 8. And to be sitting at 5 wins at the bye would have been a very, very nice way to enjoy a bye. We would have matched our win count over the last 2 entire seasons in 13 games of football. And, we would have been pretty buoyed by that fact. Fortunately, slumps do happen. And it remains to be seen whether we come back out in the second half of the year and play well. I do believe we will, but nonetheless, to be sitting at 3 wins, it's not quite as nice as 4 or 5, which it could easily have been. Next biggest negative, I think, is not actually one that we can be blamed for, but to not see Oscar Allen other than round 1 due to that knee injury. You could, again, go back to the criticism of him playing in that round 1 game anyway, considering he was clearly in pain with his knee, and then he misses, God knows how long it's been now. What was that, 12 weeks ago? It also started off as a 5 to 6 week injury, if I'm not mistaken. It is now ballooned out to 12, and, that's a blow. And Elijah Hewitt, by the same token, again, probably not one due to our negligence or anything like that, but to not see in my opinion, our second best young talent at all this year. And he's not going to be available for another 5 to 6 or something like that. And I think the chances of him playing AFL are next to zero this year. Hopefully he gets back in the next month and finishes the year strongly in the waffle, but he's coming from a long way back. And also the concern over Rhett Bazzo. I know Rhett Bazzo didn't have an amazing year last year, but I think he was dealing with a lot and still a relatively important young talent for us as a key position defender. And I do think has shown some really good signs. And, part of the concern is not only just that we haven't seen him, but the second part is like the prognosis on him has just been 4 to 6 weeks forever. And, there's a little bit of concern about that. Groin injury, what are the long-term effects, or at least the medium-term effects of that? That's a bit of a downer for me. So no Allen, Hewitt and Bazzo amongst others, but those are the main three that, have given me a little bit of concern. A negative one that's probably popped up in the next 3 weeks, I don't know if this is a long-term concern, but I've talked about it before, but the ruck combo in the forward mix, I think since Flynn has returned to this side, I think Bailey Williams has probably struggled a little bit in his new role, and Flynn's building momentum now. I don't want to go too early on this and say it's not working and we should give up on it. I get why they're persevering for it. That is the whole reason we recruited Matthew Flynn. And we should be patient. Bailey Williams had a pre-season as a forward, then had to go back to number one ruck and now is relearning how to play forward. Flynn hasn't played in about a year. So we've got to be patient with that. But at the moment, it just doesn't look really enticing, and you consider how many forwards we're picking in a game, so many talls, particularly, I said that about the North Melbourne game. I don't think we've quite got that right, to be honest. So that's probably a negative for me, but hopefully that corrects itself, or at least improves in the second half of the year. Tyler Brockman's slow start to the year. There was a bit of optimism about how he would come in and add something to us. And again, going early, he is a young guy. I think he's like a year older than Chesser, if that. What was he getting, like 9 touches a game, maybe less, and hasn't kicked a goal at AFL level. And then of course he gets himself into trouble, club imposed ban at the moment. Sounds like his waffle form's been pretty solid, but I think we were a bit more optimistic about what we were going to get out of Brockman versus what we've actually got. So that's a bit of a negative for me. And then finally also the Noah Long injury, that's a bit of a blow. I mean, we got some games into him, but for him to do a season-ending PCL, that's a shame considering he's probably in the group of our best handful of young talents. So absolutely worth mentioning as a downside for this year. The positives now. So the biggest positive is that Harley Reid plays for us. Like, how good? How good? Obviously, we're filming this in light of his suspension and him getting frustrated with the tag, and that is all part of his learning development. But when you've got an 18-year-old, or 19-year-old, I should say, first-year player, that everyone was talking about as, being a key player you need to shut out of the game. Like, I do feel like this is Judd-esque. Like, his emergence as a gun on-ball midfielder in his first season, it's not the most high volume. Like, he gets games where he has 15 touches. He's dominated games where he's had 19. He's another one where he had 21. Like, he's not high volume yet, but the impact he's having is enormous, both forward and through the midfield. His stoppage game has been fantastic. He wins clearances. He's had multiple games where he's had 7 clearances, 27 touches against Richmond off the top of my head, and then also particularly against Fremantle, swings forward as a mid-size option, and he's just such a hard matchup, and he kicks 3 goals and could get 3 Brownlow votes for that game. We'll see. But the fact that he just plays for us, part of building a premiership list is not only the depth of talent, that is important too, but is having some of these key players in the midfield that can win you games of footy, and you feel very, very confident in Harley Reid already. So don't need to sell you on Harley Reid. He's been fantastic and exceeded my expectations for how good he's been, particularly in the clinches in his first season. Jake Waterman has become one of the better players of the competition. I don't know how long that's going to stay. If you list the top players of the competition, you go Bontempelli, Petrarca, Sam Walsh, Nick Dacos. As far as key forwards go, you got Mackay, Curnow, Jeremy Cameron. There's so much competition out there. But in terms of actual form and performance this year, Jake Waterman has been absolutely unbelievable and a genuine match winner. And, I'm not going to put a cap on what he could achieve throughout his career, because at the moment he is playing like an absolute champion. And this was one of those unforeseen players that have just emerged and become an absolute star. I'm hoping he sustains it. But this is possibly the biggest positive this year. Other than the fact that we've got Harley Reid, I'd say Jake Waterman becoming an A-grade forward at the moment, hopefully he sustains it, is probably the other biggest positive. Elliot Yeo's return to the midfield and playing consistent footy and looking fit, and he's had a couple of weeks off here and there, but he's exactly what we need to be getting out of our senior players, and it's a stark contrast to what we're getting out of Sheed and Gaff. Yeo's missed a lot of footy over the last 4 years. For him to come in and, at one point he was the top 3 clearance mid in the comp, and that was before he started missing weeks. But he's been absolutely enormous and a key part in us winning the games that we have. Brady Hoff, we've already talked about at length. He's taken a lot of scalps. He's played 43 games of footy now. He looks good with the ball in hand. He does jobs on the opposition small forwards, and another player in that core group under 21, under 22 talents that you just feel so confident about now. Brady Hough has been one of the biggest positives. Next, I think, there's positives to be taken out of the fact that we've had 3 exciting wins, and, there's been some poor losses in there, but the wins that I always think it's a good long-term indicator if you're getting good wins over good teams. And I would consider Fremantle a pretty good team. And Melbourne, I know they're in a form slump at the moment, but there's no way you can't say they're not a talented team. Like Gawn, Petrarca, Oliver, Viney, all played against us, right? So to butcher them, it may have been an off day, but to play the way we did against them was absolutely sensational. And I think I'd probably prefer us having these out-of-the-box fantastic games and maybe, dropping some games against poor teams than I would if we were, say, just beating North and Richmond and getting slapped by the best teams. I actually kind of like that on our day. We can absolutely do it, and I think long-term that will build belief and shows that our best footy is not that far off. It's just that we need to perform more consistently. I think the fact that we've used what I believe is the second most amount of players of any team this year shows that we're cycling through the list, and part of that is a reflection of some injuries, but there's absolutely no doubt we've given some exposure to guys I certainly didn't expect to see this year. So we've had 5 debutants. Harley Reid, obviously. Locke Rawlinson cracked a debut. Yeah, it was a one and done, but, he performed well in the waffle to earn that. Tyrell Dewar as well, it was fantastic last year considering the lack of support in the waffle. To come in this year, earn a debut, look pretty good in flashes, and then still play reasonably well in the waffle. I think we might have a long-term player there in Dewar. Same thing with Johnston. He's played a couple of games, but he did really earn that with some really rock-solid waffle form. I think he has clear AFL traits. He's got speed, smarts, evasiveness, things that we clearly lack. He obviously just needs a little bit of time to beef up, build his running capacity before he becomes a mainstay in this team, but massive positive considering I didn't think we'd see him this year. Jack Hutchinson has come in and debuted, so that's a 5th debutant this year. And also, even seeing guys like Barnett, Cully and Shrew earn their way back into this team. Barnett was a one and done, not sure about Zane Shrew, but either way, he earned that with some solid waffle form. Jai Cully coming back off an ACL and absolutely earning his spot back into the team with some good waffle form. These are all positives. And it might feel frustrating that, we might see the Sheeds and the Gaff. So I realise that's part of a conversation that's happening out there. I understand that. But either way you slice it, you look at that 38 players used without an injury crisis. It does show that we're giving some opportunity. We're getting a good look at our list. And I think I'm happy with what we've seen, in particular from guys like, obviously Harley Reid, but Dewar, Johnston, and I think we've found one in Jack Hutchinson as well. This is all positive. Now, we talk about some youngsters improving or at least impressing us in Harley Reid and Brady Hough, but probably single out a couple of, or 3 other youngsters that I think are showing progress in this team that are not first-year players. So I think Jinby's come along. It's a slow, linear improvement from Jinby. I think he plays a tough role for his age, but I think he's getting continually better. Obviously, he adds something we lack with his aggression and his tackling game and his pace, and his kicking can be erratic, but I still don't think he's too much of a liability in that sense. And I do think he's winning more of the footy. He's playing inside and out. I think patience with Jinby. It's going to take 4 or 5 years before a genuine inside mid in Jinby is in his prime. So I'm very happy and comfortable with the progress we've seen from him. Same thing with Jack Williams. What we saw last year from Jack Williams, I thought he really held his own without the preseason. And this year, to come back and earn his spot and hold it, and he kicked 3 goals against Essendon, I think it was. He's well ahead of the curve for what I would have expected for Jack Williams, and I think he's worth persevering with longer term. Campbell Chesser as well. There's some mixed opinions out there. I think we've seen pretty rock solid form from Chesser without being great. It's been good. He's looking more composed. He's not winning a whole heap of the footy, but I think he does a lot of unrewarded running in games, and I think he's making a lot less mistakes and looking a little bit more confident. And again, probably a slow burn option. This continued exposure will be good for him longer term, and he must have played over 20 games now and may go into next year having played 30 games, and I think that will do him the world of good. So I guess the point there is just linear improvement from some younger guys, which is very, very important to us right now. The other positive is we made use of the mid-season draft, and I think we took a good player. Now, I won't lie and say that I'm a full bottle on Jack Hutchinson. That played out while I was away, but you read the reports, and the fact that he comes over and kicks 5 goals in his first game, I think we've got a player with AFL traits there. It'll be interesting to see what we do with that, but you look at our last 3 mid-season drafts to take Cully, Marrick, and Hutchinson. We've really made use of this new way to accumulate talent onto your list, and I think Hutchinson's is worth persevering with. I think he's got the speed, the skills, the talent. I think he's got the versatility. And I'd like to see him continue to grow in this team. I think we've done well there. I'll also highlight the Waffle team has improved, which is a positive because that becomes an important place for us to develop talent. Now, is it sufficiently competitive for us to really foster the talent that we have? 3 and 6 isn't too bad. I know that the losses have been bad, but in particular in recent weeks, it has been a lot better. Now, we probably still have too many amateurs and under 21 talents playing to be really competitive, but to be 3 and 6 and having claimed some scalps, I think that's really positive. And I think there's no doubt we've seen players actually come in and in pockets really earn a spot through Waffle form. Your Jai Cullies, your Zane Trews, Hutchinson's, Dewar, Johnston, like there's a few examples there, which is something we haven't had for a few years. So a conservative tick for me for the first half of the year for the Waffle. I know the Subi game wasn't good, but it is a lot better than it was. And I think it's moderately acceptable exactly how well they're going right now. And the other positive is we're still on track for a top 3 pick. And I'm relatively comfortable with, some of the positives we've had this year. It is so important to us still to get the best talent we can on the list. And you could say that, having pick 3 versus pick 7, it's not a huge difference, but, maybe we're in a position to flip that pick. We might get creative this year. And if it's a top 3 pick, maybe we end up with a Sid Draper or a Jagger Smith or a Christian Moraes. We still do need to accumulate talent. Us smashing Melbourne does not change that. The depth of young talent on our list still needs to be added to. And we're still in a good position and have had some really good memories this year. I'll just fire off some stats before we finish this video. I've got some negative stats and positive stats. So at the start of the year, Simo's talked about bringing our contested game, our forward half game, and our ground ball game as being key pillars of where we start the rebuild. And I'll probably start with a negative. A contested ball differential. We were second in the comp after we beat Richmond, and that might have been true also after Fremantle. I think it was actually after Fremantle where we slaughtered both of those teams in that stat. And we were sitting 2 and 4 and second in the league for contested ball. That has now dropped to 16th. We have not been good in that. I think we beat Melbourne in that stat. I don't know if we've beaten anyone else in contested ball, maybe Essendon by 1. So that's a bit of a drop off. However, we are still above the league average in ground balls. And we were terrible at this for the last 4 years, really. So that's a positive. We're also not 18th in scores from stoppage. I did a video at the start of the year. We were historically bad, the worst team ever, I think, last year for scores from stoppage differential. And we're now 16th, which means there's 2 other teams worse than that. And, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball there, but that is definitely an improvement. Inside 50 differential was horrendous last year, horrendous. I think we probably struggled to get over 30 in some games. We're at least 3rd last in the league, which mirrors our ladder position, but this was a real problem for us getting the ball inside 50. Our forward line efficiency was never terrible, but we just couldn't get the ball inside 50, and we are now slightly better at that. We're also 3rd in the league for pressure acts. Now, pressure acts are a weird one. There's not really a big correlation with the ladder, but nonetheless, pressure was something we talked about pre-season, and we're putting on that pressure. However, we're not laying tackles, and when you consider we're either last or second last, I think, for disposals. We generally don't get a lot of the footy, particularly on the outside. In dispute, we haven't been too bad at that, but on the outside, the uncontested ball and link-up play. I know uncontested ball doesn't sound like something you want to get a lot in, but it just reflects, outside running power and the ability to transition the ball. We're not good at that, so we're getting a lot less of the ball than the opposition, and we're the worst tackling team in the comp. That's got to change. We do need to be laying more tackles. Also, 18th in the league for hitouts to advantage. We've been a bit undermanned without Flynn, who came in and was recruited specifically to be our best 22 number 1 ruckman with Bailey Williams supporting him. I don't know if Bailey Williams is playing as well this year as he is last year. I didn't list him as a negative. Give him a little bit of lenience there. He's playing a new role and is still pretty young for a ruck. He's got time still. What is he, 23? I don't think he even turns 24. Maybe he turns 24 this year. That's a baby for a ruck. But either way, 18th in the league for hitouts to advantage. So those are some stats to reflect where exactly we're at. Like I said, it's been topsy-turvy this year. We're feeling amazing one week. The last 3 weeks were a little bit flat, but I do feel like some good wins are around the corner. You look at our fixture, and I wouldn't blame anyone for saying, I don't know how many of those we're going to win, but we will. We will. I honestly reckon we will. We'll win a couple of games out of the box, and if we end the season with 5 wins, we would have taken that at the start of the year, and we've got some pretty decent young talent now, which, assuming we don't win too many more games, we add to with a high draft pick this year. So that's my take on what's happened in the first 13 rounds, guys. As always, I welcome your comments below. Let me know what I missed. You guys are always really good for adding perspectives that I kind of forget or didn't think of. So I look forward to your input, and let me know any more ideas for videos that you want me to do this week. For now, I thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.